Okay, welcome to Chapter 2. As you went through Chapter 1, and as you're looking through Chapter 2 and looking through your PowerPoint presentations, remind you to make sure that you print those out so you can go along with those as you listen to the lecture and as you read your chapters, and make sure to make notes. But you may be wondering why economics is considered for the most part under the social sciences, and why is it, because it has so much math and so much use of data, is it not under another area? Well, economists and people who study economics use economics to help predict outcomes of future society, future benefits, future GDP, future growth and analysis, not only the business world, but also the effects that the business world has on us socially. For example, if someone loses their job, then because of their business falling short or not being successful, then likely they're more than likely to have issues at home and other problems that are associated with the stress of money and not having that income coming in. So social and behavioral sciences and economics play a key role in merging together and being able to produce a science that is based on numbers and based on predictions, but also can help society as a whole. So we're going to talk a little bit about the roles of an economist, some of the simple tools that they use, and some of the methods that they use, and we'll go through that. This chapter, we want to talk about the different methods and how economists apply methods and secondary data to create issues that we've already talked about as far as price points and equilibrium, how these models can be used around the world, how governments use them, how economists are used as policy advisors. We want to talk about the difference between microeconomics, macroeconomics, the difference between positive statements and normative statements, and the role the economist has in government and in business, and the general overall effect that they can have. Economists try to address their subject with a scientific objectivity. They're trying to use numbers so that they have a proof or reason why that they're making these suggestions. Like all scientists, they make appropriate assumptions that build on simplified models. We'll talk about the models as we go along in the semester. To understand the world. Two simple economic models that we'll talk about are the circular flow diagram, which is in this PowerPoint, and also the production possibility frontier, which talks about outcomes. And so we'll look at both of those through this lecture. The field of economics is divided into the two fields that we talked about: the study of microeconomics, the study of macroeconomics. Microeconomics is the study of decisions being made by individual households and individual firms in the interaction among other households and firms in the marketplace. So microeconomics is looking at the individual impact that certain variables will have on a certain specific type of market or a certain type of household income or households. Macroeconomics studies all of the forces, the trends, the variables, government influence, outcome-based decisions, everything that goes into economics. Macroeconomics studies the forces and trends that affect the economy as a whole. So now we move on to positive statements and nominative statements. A positive statement is what the economist says, what will be the prediction or the outcome from the variables and how they placed into the market. A positive statement is an assertion about how the world is, what is going on, where it stands right now. A normative statement is an assertion about how the world ought to be, where the economist says that it could get to by using these certain ways and means. When economists make normative statements, they are acting more as policy advisors more than they do as scientists. The scientist type of economics is going to be more of the positive statement. That's where you use secondary data to produce what has happened. The normative statement is when the economist uses that to policy advise for government, for businesses, for business plans, for banks, industries, saying if you do X and Y, your result will be Z. So just keep that in mind. It should be in the books, explain in a little bit more detail. But the economists do consider themselves scientists because they are making predictions. Economists follow the strict scientific method. Data can be collected and analyzed and evaluated into theories, just like in science where you make hypotheses to make predictions and outcomes. Thus, economists do pay close attention to the natural experiments that are offered by history. So the things that are going on in history, economists do take that and use those to make their assumptions and outcomes. I call that secondary data analysis. It makes the world easier to understand. It makes it easier to understand international trade. Not everybody does the things that we do in the U.S. Not everyone in the South produces and buys and sells as the same as everyone up north. So there's definitely value in looking at outputs and using secondary data. Economists use models to explain the world. Most economic models compose of diagrams and equations. And as I talked about in our opening and in some of the writings that I've sent to you guys, is that I don't want you to get, I want you to know the formulas, I want you to see them, I want you to know how to work them for the most part when it comes to supply and demand, but I don't want you getting so caught up in them that you miss out on the topics and the issues that come with economics. So, but we do need to talk about the first two. You should have a PowerPoint presentation. It talks about the circular flow diagram. As you can see, markets have goods and services. Firms sell, households buy. And then if you follow the lines across, households buy and consume, and firms sell and produce. And as you can see, the inner loop represents the flow of inputs and outputs between households and firms. The outer loop represents the flow of dollars between households and firms. So basically what it is a visual model of the economy that shows how dollars flow through markets along to households and firms. This diagram is a simple model of the economy. Note that it ignores the roles of government and international trade. That would be more variables that could come in as far as regulations and taxes that could change things in different ways. Firms are sellers in the market for goods and services, and buyers are in the market for factors in production. Households and buyers are in the market for goods and services, and sellers are in the market for factors of production. So as you can see, you can't have one without the other. One generates the other. The more tax revenue that goes into an economy, the more people are likely to spend. The more people will spend, the more firms will produce. To be able to produce, firms have to hire more employees, pay them a higher wage. Therefore, those employees turn back around and put money into the markets. So the circular flow diagram is probably the most simple and easiest way to see it, and continues to explain supply and demand.